Okay, I would like to use this opportunity to really reflect on the question of the workshop, whose change is it anyway? Like what Nishan said, in my previous research, I'm drawn to the question of change. So how do digital natives approach change? How do they conceptualize change? But this time around, I am actually intrigued by the question of whose. Let me illustrate by these two images. So these are two separate actions that took place in the roundabout of Hotel Indonesia in Jakarta. Sort of like the Tahrir Square of Indonesia, where all the protests to topple the old New Order regime, the dictatorial one in 1998 happened. The first one was a miniskirt rally. So it's like the slut walk of Indonesia, where women wear miniskirts to say that don't tell us how to dress, tell men not to rape, as a response to a couple of cases of rape and public transportation that occurred in Indonesia. I was actually a part of this protest as well. And the second one was more recent. This is actually on Valentine's Day, just a few weeks ago. And that was a protest of people wearing the hijab. And they're saying that, let's wear hijab. Hijab is my identity. And now, what I'm reflecting on is what have we been missing by only focusing on the first kind of changes, the ones that are associated with the progressive narrative, the ones that are associated more with freedom of expression, very Western feminist values, and what are we missing as researchers or as activists by not understanding more of this kind of changes, the ones of values that we may not agree in, but are done in ways that are quite similar to the progressive movements that we are so enamored with. So I was actually quite surprised when I take a deeper look at this movement. As you can see, this is very cute. It's very anime Japanese style, and this is not what one has in mind when thinking of a hijab promoting wearing movement, no? You think about coercion, you think about forces, but you don't think about this. So I got quite intrigued, and I started to question, when we talk about citizen action, which citizens are we actually talking about? Citizens are plural. They come with very different sorts of ideologies and mindsets. And are we missing out when we don't talk about the other parts of the citizens? Next slide, please. So I took it as an opportunity to try and put my own political mindset aside and just look at this case and see what kind of reflections I have that can guide me into thinking more about citizen action. The first one is this one. This is an advertisement for a hijab class. So if you pay for a certain money, you can get a hijab tutorial exercise and you can get discounts to hijab or Muslim fashions. And this started to make me think about the separation of citizen, state, and the market. In the theories that I'm introduced to and the popular discourse that I'm also used to, people treat this as very different entities, as if that it's not porous, as if that states and markets are not also consisting of citizens. But as you can see in this movement, actually, the separation is not very clear. Market also constitutes of individual actors who are also citizens, and in this case, they are using their position as a market actor to also promote their causes, to also promote their ideals. So with this in mind, I'm starting to think about the three different separation and what happens when we try to unpack the notion of change or citizenship by looking at these three institutions as porous entities. The other thing that I'm reflecting on in this idea of contestation, we are also so fixated on the idea of events as a spectacle for change, to borrow Nishan's term, that we forget about the process. And looking at this case, it's actually quite interesting to see the contestation. If we stop seeing a citizen action as a particular event and start to unpack it as a process, then you can see this sort of sub-movements that also make a part of the action. Like in this hijab wearing movement, there's also a camp that thinks that modification or very fashionable styles are the way to go. But there are also those who think that hijab is not jewelry, it's not accessory, it's not supposed to make you look attractive, so this is not the way to go. These kinds of contestations is not actually new. We see it happening in the feminist movement and the women's movement, but the idea of unpacking this contestation is somehow lost in the narrative of only focusing on spectacles. What happened in Tahrir Square, what happened in slut walks, what happened in India with the rape case. If we stop looking at it as a particular type of event, then maybe these kind of contestations will emerge and will provide us with new frameworks or new ideas on how to look or define citizen action. And this is the third and final reflection that I had based on this case. This idea of locality or global and local connections. When the miniskirt rally happened, people say, okay, it's the slut walk of Indonesia. And when we talk about the World Hijab Movement, during the dinner conversation yesterday, Nikat and Nasra actually told me that this is also happening in Pakistan, in the US, in Turkey, and people tend to think that it might be the same thing. It's one thing, same ideologies that get imported everywhere. But actually, if you take a look at this World Hijab Day, and you look at the website, it comes from a very different context. This is actually an exercise to promote understanding of non-Muslims about what it means to be a woman wearing a hijab. So we have this stereotype that an action or an ideology is very easily transported from places. And when we talk about locality, it's most likely always referring to the north coming to the south. But what about the idea of locality as something that is much more dispersed? So this phenomena that is happening in Indonesia is also happening in Malaysia, it's also happening in Turkey, and also in the US. But they may come with different narratives, and they come in various ways to connect with each other. So these are the three kinds of reflections that I had to think about how we can start unpacking this notion of change based on looking at the case study that I normally wouldn't look at because of my political biases. Yeah, that's it so far.